Here's a psychological satisfying fact you are not ready to hear. There is an entire generation of people walking around right now, holding everything together for everyone else, and not a single person has ever asked them, "Are you okay?" Not their parents, not their children, not their partners, not society, nobody. They are Gen X, born between 1965 and 1980, and they are the most psychologically neglected generation in modern history. You think millennials had it rough? You think Gen Z is struggling? They are. But at least someone is talking about it. At least someone made a hashtag. At least someone cares. Gen X got nothing. No hashtag, no awareness campaign, no therapy trend, no viral TikTok explaining their trauma. They got silence. And that silence is now killing them from the inside out. Psychologists call this the invisible generation syndrome. It is not an official diagnosis. It is something far worse. It is a collective psychological wound so normalized that even the people carrying it do not recognize it as a wound. They think it is just who they are. Independent, tough, self-reliant, fine. But they are not fine. They have never been fine. And by the time you finish listening to this, you will understand why Gen X is quietly falling apart, while the rest of the world argues about which generation had it worse. Let us start from the beginning. And the beginning is brutal. Picture this. It is 1978. You are 7 years old. You come home from school. The house is empty. The lights are off. There is a note on the counter that says, "Heat up the leftovers, do your homework, lock the door." Your mom is working. Your dad is either working or gone. You are 7, and you are alone. This was not abuse. This was Tuesday. This was normal. They called them latchkey kids, children who wore their house key on a string around their neck because there was no one home to let them in. An estimated 40% of Gen X children were latchkey kids. 40%. That means nearly half of an entire generation came home every single day to an empty house and learned, at the age of 6 or 7, that they were on their own. No after-school programs, no helicopter parents, no playdates organized by anxious mothers, no GPS tracking on their phones. They did not have phones. They had a key, an empty house, and the television. And here is what nobody talks about. A child who comes home to an empty house does not just learn independence. A child who comes home to an empty house learns that their emotional needs are not a priority, that asking for help is pointless, that the world does not revolve around them, that they need to figure it out themselves. This is not resilience. This is survival adaptation. And there is a massive psychological difference between the two. Resilience says, "I went through something hard and I had support to process it." Survival adaptation says, "I went through something hard and I had no choice but to shut down my emotional needs to get through it." Gen X did not build resilience. They built armor. And that armor is now suffocating them. But it gets worse. Much worse. The empty house was just the backdrop. Let us talk about what was happening inside the family. Gen X children grew up during the single greatest explosion of divorce in American history. Between 1960 and 1980, The divorce rate in the United States doubled. It peaked in 1980 at over 50%. Do you understand what that means? More than half of Gen X kids watch their family disintegrate. They watch their parents scream at each other. They watch their father pack a suitcase. They watch their mother cry at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning. And then something happened that would define their entire psychology. Nobody explained it to them. In the 70s and 80s, the dominant parenting philosophy was, children are resilient, they will bounce back. Adults treated divorce like an adult problem. Children were told, do not worry about it. Mommy and Daddy still love you. Everything will be fine. But everything was not fine. The child did not have the language to say, I feel abandoned. The child did not have the framework to say, my sense of safety has been destroyed. The child did not have permission to say, I am terrified. So the child did what children do when they have no support. The child adapted. The child learned to read the room. The child learned to sense tension before it exploded. The child became hyper-vigilant. The child learned to be small, to be quiet, to be invisible, to not be a burden. The child learned that emotions are dangerous, that vulnerability is weakness, that needing someone is a liability. This is not growing up fast. This is a trauma response called parentification. It is when a child is forced to become their own parent because the actual parents are too overwhelmed, too absent, or too broken to do the job. And Gen X was parentified on a mass scale. They did not just lose their childhood, they were never given one. Now let us add another layer. Because this generation did not just deal with absent parents and broken homes, they dealt with something even more insidious. They dealt with being completely, totally, systematically ignored by culture. Think about it. The baby boomers had the 60s, Woodstock, the civil rights movement, the moon landing. They were the largest generation in history, and the entire world revolved around them. Still does. The millennials had the internet revolution. They had social media. They had think pieces and research studies and an entire mental health industry built around their anxiety and depression. Gen Z has TikTok. They have therapy speak. They have safe spaces and trigger warnings and an entire vocabulary for their emotional experience. What did Gen X get? They got called slackers. That is it. That is the cultural narrative. In the early 90s, the media looked at this generation and said, oh, these kids are just lazy and apathetic. They do not care about anything. They listen to grunge music and wear flannel and have no ambition. Nobody asked why. Nobody looked at the latchkey kid who raised himself since age 7, who watched his family fall apart, who was never taught emotional language, who was told to figure it out, and thought, maybe this kid is not lazy. Maybe this kid is exhausted. Maybe this kid checked out because checking in was never safe. The apathy was not laziness. It was a defense mechanism. In psychology, it is called learned helplessness meets emotional numbing. When a child learns early that their environment is uncontrollable and their feelings do not matter, they stop trying and they stop feeling. It looks like apathy. It is actually a form of depression so deep it does not even register as sadness anymore. It registers as nothing. Gen X did not feel nothing because they were cool. They felt nothing because feeling something was too dangerous. And here is the part that nobody wants to admit. This pattern did not stop when they grew up. It got worse. It evolved. It became the operating system of their entire adult life. Let me show you how. Gen X is now between 45 and 60 years old. They are in the prime of their careers. Many of them are in leadership positions. They are running companies, managing teams, making decisions. And they are falling apart. The statistics are staggering. Gen X has the highest rate of burnout of any generation in the workforce. Not millennials, not boomers, Gen X. Gen X has the highest rate of alcohol and substance abuse of any living generation. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that drug overdose deaths among 45 to 65-year-olds have increased by over 400% since 1999. That age range is almost entirely Gen X. Gen X has the highest rate of divorce among current generations. They watched their parents divorce and swore they would do better. Many of them are now repeating the exact same cycle. Gen X has rising rates of suicide, particularly among Gen X men. The silence is literally killing them. And yet, when you search for mental health resources, when you look at therapy marketing, when you scroll through wellness content online, who is it aimed at? Millennials, Gen Z, sometimes boomers. Gen X is invisible. Again, still, always. They are the middle child of history, and they are playing out the middle child syndrome on a generational scale. Overlooked, undervalued, expected to hold everything together without recognition or support. But here is where it gets psychologically devastating. Gen X does not just suffer from neglect. They are addicted to it. They have internalized the neglect so deeply that they now inflict it on themselves. This is the most important thing you will hear today. Gen X does not ask for help. Not because they do not need it, but because their entire identity is built on not needing it. Psychologists call this toxic independence. It is a trauma response disguised as a personality trait. The inner narrative sounds like this: I do not need anyone. I can handle it myself. I am fine. Asking for help is weak. Depending on someone is dangerous. If I need you, you will leave, so I will never need you. This sounds like strength. It is not. It is a 6-year-old child standing in an empty kitchen, realizing that no one is coming, and making a vow to never be that vulnerable again. That vow was necessary at 6. It is destroying them at 50. Because here is what toxic independence actually costs you. It costs you intimacy. You cannot be truly close to someone if you never let them see you struggle. Your partner does not feel needed. Your partner feels shut out. Your partner eventually stops trying. It costs you health. You do not go to the doctor because you can tough it out. You do not go to therapy because that is for people who cannot handle their problems. You ignore symptoms. You self-medicate. You drink a little more than you should. You tell yourself it is fine. It costs you joy. When you are hyper-independent, you experience life as a series of tasks to be completed alone. There is no softness. There is no surrender. There is no moment where you exhale and let someone else carry the weight. You are always on, always performing, always managing. It costs you your children. Your kids see a parent who is competent but emotionally unavailable. Sound familiar? You swore you would be different from your parents, but you replicated the exact same dynamic, not through absence, but through emotional distance. Your kid does not need you to provide more. Your kid needs you to be present. And you cannot be present because you are drowning in responsibilities you refuse to share with anyone. This is the Gen X trap. They are so good at surviving that they forgot how to live. And here is the darkest layer of all. Gen X knows something is wrong. Deep down in the quiet moments, late at night, after the third glass of whiskey, they know. They feel the emptiness. They feel the exhaustion that sleep does not fix. They feel the distance growing between them and the people they love. But they cannot name it. They were never given the emotional vocabulary. They grew up in an era where feelings were not discussed, where therapy was stigmatized, where being a man meant being stoic and being a woman meant being strong. So they sit with this unnamed pain, and they do what they have always done. They push through. They wake up. They go to work. They pay the bills. They fix the leaky faucet. They drive their kids to practice. They call their aging parents. They hold it all together. And nobody checks on them. Nobody says, "Hey, I know you have been carrying a lot. How are you really doing?" Nobody. Ever. And if someone did ask, they would not know how to answer, because the honest answer would require them to crack open a door they sealed shut 40 years ago. And behind that door is a 7-year-old kid sitting alone in an empty house, waiting for someone to come home. That kid is still waiting. Now let us talk about what this looks like in their relationships, because this is where the damage becomes most visible. Gen X relationships follow a very specific psychological pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Pattern 1. The avoidant attachment loop. Attachment theory identifies 4 styles of attachment: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Gen X disproportionately falls into avoidant attachment. This means they crave connection, but are terrified of dependency. They want love, but they keep it at arm's length. The avoidant partner seems self-sufficient, seems emotionally stable, seems like they have it all together. But underneath, they are running a constant program that says, "If I let you too close, you will see the real me. And the real me was not enough for my parents, so it will not be enough for you." They show love through action, not emotion. They fix things, they provide, they solve problems. But they do not talk about feelings. They do not cry in front of you. They do not say, "I am scared," or "I need you." Their partner feels loved, but not known, taken care of, but not connected to. And over time, the partner starts to feel lonely, even in the same room. This is the Gen X marriage. 2 people sharing a house, sharing a bed, sharing a life, and feeling completely alone. Pattern 2. The competence cage. Gen X built their identity around being capable. I can handle anything. I am the person people come to when things go wrong. This is the competence cage. It means they are always the strong one, always the fixer, always the rock. And no one ever thinks to ask the rock if it is tired. The rock does not get to crumble. The rock does not get to say, "I cannot do this anymore." Because if the rock crumbles, what happens to everyone leaning on it? So they stay rigid. They stay strong. They calcify. And inside the cage, they are screaming. Pattern 3. The midlife implosion. This is happening right now, across the country, across the world. Gen X is hitting midlife, and the bill is coming due. The armor they built as children was designed for survival, not for a full life. And now, at 45, at 50, at 55, the armor is cracking. It shows up as the sudden divorce that nobody saw coming. 20 years of marriage, and one day they just leave. People say, "What happened? They seemed so stable." They were not stable. They were frozen. There is a difference. It shows up as the career crisis. The executive who walks away from a six-figure job with no plan. People say he lost his mind. No, he found it. For the first time in 40 years, he asked himself, "Do I even want this?" And the answer was, no. It shows up as the health crisis. The heart attack at 48. The cancer diagnosis at 52. Decades of suppressed stress stored in the body, finally expressing itself the only way it can. The body keeps the score. And Gen X has been running up a tab for decades. It shows up as the quiet withdrawal. They stop calling friends. They stop going out. They sit in the garage or the basement and they stare at the wall. They are not lazy. They are in psychological collapse. But it looks like nothing, because Gen X has always been invisible. Nobody notices when a ghost disappears. Let us go deeper. Let us talk about what was happening in the culture while Gen X was raising themselves. The 70s and 80s were not just decades of divorce. They were decades of complete cultural upheaval with zero emotional infrastructure. Gen X kids were exposed to adult content on a level no previous generation had experienced. Television was unfiltered. Movies were unrated or loosely rated. They watched horror films at age 8. They saw graphic violence on the evening news. They witnessed the Cold War, the threat of nuclear annihilation, as a daily backdrop to their childhood. They were told the world could end any day, literally. Nuclear drills in school, duck and cover, the doomsday clock. They internalized existential dread before they hit puberty, and nobody processed it with them. There were no school counselors talking about anxiety. There were no parents explaining geopolitics in age-appropriate terms. The message was, the world is terrifying, and you are on your own. This created a generation with a unique psychological signature. Hyper-awareness of mortality combined with emotional numbness. They know life is short, but they cannot feel it. They understand intellectually that they should be present and grateful, but the emotional circuitry was damaged too early. They are cynical not because they are negative, but because optimism was beaten out of them by reality before they were 10. The Gen X brand of humor confirms this. Dark, sarcastic, self-deprecating. They laugh about their trauma because laughing is the only emotional expression that was ever allowed. A boomer processes pain through denial. A millennial processes pain through expression. Gen Z processes pain through identity. Gen X processes pain through sarcasm. And sarcasm is not processing. Sarcasm is a pressure valve. It releases just enough steam to prevent an explosion, but it never addresses the source of the heat. So the fire keeps burning, year after year, decade after decade. Now let us talk about the sandwich generation, because this is where the current crisis reaches its peak. Gen X is right now simultaneously caring for aging boomer parents and supporting millennial or Gen Z children. They are sandwiched between two generations, both of which demand enormous emotional and financial resources. Their parents are getting sick, dementia, cancer, strokes, heart failure.
Gen X is making medical decisions, managing care facilities, watching the people who never took care of them slowly deteriorate. And they are doing it with complicated grief. Because how do you mourn someone who was never really there for you? How do you sit at your mother's bedside and feel the expected sadness when part of you is still angry that she was never home? How do you manage your father's care when he never managed your feelings? This is called ambiguous grief. It is the grief of losing someone you never fully had. And it is one of the most psychologically complex forms of grief that exists. There is no clean resolution. There is no closure. There is only the weight of unresolved attachment played out in hospital rooms and nursing homes. At the same time, their children need them. The economy is brutal. Housing is unaffordable. Gen X kids are moving back home or needing financial support well into their 20s and 30s. And Gen X provides it. Of course they do. Because that is what they do. They provide. But nobody is providing for them. They are hemorrhaging money upward and downward. They are hemorrhaging emotional energy in every direction. And they are doing it without complaining, because complaining was never an option. The sandwich generation is being crushed, and Gen X is the bread. Here is the psychological mechanism that keeps this cycle going. It is called the parentification loop. When Gen X was young, they were parentified. They became little adults before they were ready. They took care of their siblings. They managed their parents' emotions. They cooked dinner for themselves at age 8. Now, as adults, they are still doing it. They are still taking care of everyone. But now they have even more people to take care of. And the original wound, the wound of never being taken care of themselves, has never healed. So they operate from deficit every day. They give and give and give from a well that was never filled. And they wonder why they feel empty. They wonder why they feel resentful. They wonder why, despite having everything they were supposed to want, the house, the career, the family, they feel hollow inside. The hollowness is not ingratitude. It is starvation. They are emotionally starving. They have been starving since childhood. And no amount of providing for others will fill the void that was created by never being provided for. This is the Gen X paradox. They take care of everyone because no one took care of them. And the more they take care of others, the less anyone thinks they need care. It is a perfect closed loop of invisible suffering. Now, let us talk about Gen X men specifically, because this is a crisis within a crisis. Gen X men were raised during the last era of unchallenged traditional masculinity. They were told men do not cry. Man up. Rub some dirt on it. Handle it. Their fathers, boomer men, were often emotionally absent or actively hostile to any display of vulnerability. The model of manhood they received was work hard, provide, say nothing, die. Gen X men internalized this completely, and now they are the demographic most resistant to therapy, most likely to self-medicate with alcohol, and most likely to die by suicide in midlife. The numbers are horrifying. Middle-aged men, primarily Gen X, have the highest suicide rate of any demographic group. Not teenagers, not elderly, men between 45 and 65. And nobody talks about it, because these men do not talk about it. They do not post about it. They do not create support groups. They just quietly disappear. One day they are at the office, coaching their kids' soccer team, mowing the lawn. The next day, they are gone. And everyone says, "I had no idea. He seemed fine." He was not fine. He was never fine. He was performing fine for 50 years, and the performance finally became unsustainable. This is not a personal failure. This is a systemic, generational trauma playing out to its logical conclusion. You cannot raise an entire generation without emotional support and expect them to survive emotionally. And yet here is the cruelest irony. Gen X raised the most emotionally aware generation in history. Think about that. Gen X parents, despite never receiving emotional nurturing themselves, looked at their children and said, "I will not do to you what was done to me." They read the parenting books. They showed up to the recitals. They asked their kids, "How was your day?" and actually listened. Millennials and Gen Z have emotional vocabulary because Gen X gave it to them. These younger generations can identify their attachment styles and set boundaries and go to therapy because Gen X created the conditions for that to be possible. Gen X broke the cycle. They broke it with their bare hands, with no tools, with no model to follow. They gave their children what they never received, and they did it while slowly dying inside. That is not just strength. That is a kind of heroism that no one will ever acknowledge, because acknowledging it would require seeing Gen X, and nobody sees Gen X. If this triggered you, good. That means something inside you is finally being recognized. Here is the truth you have been avoiding. You are not fine. You have never been fine. And the fact that you have survived this long without anyone noticing does not mean you are strong. It means you are invisible. And invisibility is not a superpower. It is a wound. The self-reliance you are so proud of is a scar. It is the scar left by every time you needed someone, and no one was there. It is the scar left by every empty house, every ignored cry, every time you were told to handle it. You handled it. You have been handling it for 40 years, and you are exhausted. The exhaustion you feel is not because you are getting old. It is because you have been carrying a weight that was never yours to carry, without rest, without recognition, without relief, since you were a child. You deserve to put it down. You deserve to be asked, "How are you?" and have it actually mean something.
You deserve to answer honestly. So here is your protocol. Not a life overhaul. Gen X does not do those. Just small, real, uncomfortable steps. Step 1. Admit the wound exists. You are not just independent. You are hyper-independent because you were neglected. Name it. Say it out loud. I was emotionally neglected as a child, and I have been compensating ever since. This is not weakness. This is the most brutally honest thing you have ever done. And honesty is the first crack in the armor. Step 2. Let one person in. Not everyone. One person. Your partner. Your closest friend. Your sibling. Say something real. Say, I have been carrying a lot, and I do not know how to talk about it. You do not need to have a breakdown. You do not need to tell your whole story. Just open the door 1 inch. 1 inch is enough. Your nervous system will scream at you. It will say, "This is dangerous. They will leave. They will think you are weak." That is the 7-year-old talking. Thank him for protecting you this long, and then open the door anyway. Step 3. Stop performing competence. You do not have to fix everything. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to be the rock. The next time someone asks you, "How are you?" do not say, "Fine." Say, honestly, "It has been a tough week." See what happens. I promise the world will not collapse. You have been so busy being strong for everyone else that you forgot you are also someone who deserves care. Step 4. Grieve what you did not get. This is the hardest one, and it is the most important. You need to grieve the childhood you did not have. You need to grieve the parents who were not there. You need to grieve the version of yourself that was never allowed to be a child.
This grief is not self-pity.
It is liberation. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. And you have been refusing to feel this for decades. Let it come, in whatever form it takes. Tears, anger, silence, shaking. Let it move through you. It has been stuck long enough. Step 5. Accept that you matter. Not because of what you do, not because of what you provide, not because of how many people depend on you. You matter because you exist. You mattered when you were 7 and alone in that house. You mattered when nobody came. You mattered when nobody asked. You matter now. You have spent your entire life being the person nobody checked on. You taught yourself everything. You raised yourself. You built a life from nothing with no blueprint, no safety net, no applause. And you are still here. Not because the world took care of you, but because you took care of yourself. That is extraordinary. But it is also enough. You have done enough. You have proven enough. You have earned the right to stop performing and start living. The latchkey is still around your neck. You can take it off now. Someone is finally checking on you. How are you? Really? This is not motivation. This is a long overdue conversation with a generation that deserved better. You deserved better. And it is not too late to give yourself what the world never did. Start today. The armor served its purpose, but the war is over. Take it off. Breathe. You are safe now.